Good evening, my dear friend. The day's last light is fading, and with it, the bustling sounds of our little city are giving way to the gentle whispers of evening. Tonight, I'm sampling a new green tea I discovered at that charming little shop on High Street. It's a delightful blend with hints of jasmine and a subtle, smoky finish that lingers on the palate. Actually, it reminds me of that afternoon we spent in that hidden garden just a few weeks ago. Perhaps I'll convince you to try it when you come home. For now, I hope you are safe and warm in your southern research station. It's incredible to think how close you are to those massive sheets of ice, and how your work there, like mine here, is helping us piece together the intricate puzzle of our changing world. I wonder what secrets the Antarctic winds are whispering to you tonight. Isn't it curious how a simple cup of tea can transport us so vividly to cherished memories? I found myself wondering what memories this blend might evoke for you. Perhaps I'll convince you to try it next time you are here. Anyway, with all this talk of tea, I almost forgot to tell you about how a simple afternoon outing became an unexpected adventure. I had decided to treat myself to lunch at that new café on Elm Street. You know the one, with its cheery blue awning and the scent of freshly baked bread wafting through the air. As I savoured my meal, enjoying the gentle hum of conversations around me, I noticed Claire enter. You might recall my mentioning her before. She lives down the street and is often seen walking her golden retriever, Rocky. Claire gave me a warm smile as she passed my table, commenting on the cafe's charming atmosphere. I watched as she collected her order and left, the bell above the door chiming softly in her wake. The cafe settled back into its peaceful rhythm, and I returned to my book, savouring the last bites of my sandwich. Suddenly, the door burst open again. Claire rushed in, her face a canvas of worry and distress. "Has anyone seen Rocky?" she asked, her eyes darting around the room. "He's disappeared." The other patrons shook their heads, but I couldn't help but offer my assistance. As we stepped outside, Claire recounted their morning, her words tumbling out in a rush of concern. "I tied Rocky to the bike rack while I popped him for a coffee," she explained, holding Rocky's leash in her hand, the collar still attached. "He must have slipped his collar somehow. I was only gone for a moment, and when I came back, he'd vanished." She gestured helplessly at the empty space where Rocky should have been. I placed a comforting hand on her arm. "Where did you take him before coming here?" I asked, trying to piece together the timeline. Claire took a deep breath, visibly calming herself. "We went to the park as usual this morning," she said. "I sat on our regular bench next to Mr. Harrison, that kind gentleman we often see. Rocky seemed oddly interested in something around the bench when we said our goodbyes, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Something about the mention of the park tugged at my mind. "Why don't we start our search there?" I suggested. "It's a familiar place for Rocky, after all." Claire nodded gratefully, and we set off at a brisk pace. The park was quiet in the early afternoon lull, the play area almost empty of children. We made our way to the bench Claire had mentioned, hoping for any sign of Rocky. As we approached, we noticed Mr. Graves, the groundskeeper, raking nearby. His face lit up with recognition as we neared. "Afternoon, Claire," he called out. "Are you looking for your four-legged friend?" "Yes," Claire replied eagerly. "Have you seen him?" Mr. Graves nodded vigorously. As a matter of fact, I was surprised to see Rocky earlier show up again after you had left. He was sniffing around this very bench like his life depended on it. Then, oddest thing, he ran off with something in his mouth. Looked mighty determined, he did. This new information set my mind whirring. "Claire," I said slowly, piecing things together. "You mentioned sitting here with Mr. Harrison this morning. Does Rocky know him well?" "Oh yes," she replied. "Rocky adores Mr. Harrison. He always gives him a good scratch behind the ears. Sometimes even a treat." A theory began to form in my mind. Is it possible, I ventured, that Mr. Harrison dropped something? And Rocky, being the clever dog he is, decided to return it? Claire's eyes widened with realization. Now that you mention it, Rocky did keep looking back as we left the park. I thought he was just being stubborn, but maybe... Oh, do you think he's trying to go to Mr. Harrison's house? It seemed the most logical explanation. Rocky, loyal and intelligent as he was, might indeed try to return a lost item to someone he knew well. "Do you know where Mr. Harrison lives?" I asked. "Not exactly," Claire replied, "but I know it's in that lovely old neighbourhood just east of here. He's mentioned walking to the park from home." With this new lead, we set off towards the eastern part of town. The streets were lined with charming Victorian houses, their gardens bursting with summer blooms. As we walked, we asked passers-by if they'd seen a golden retriever. Most shook their heads, but an old lady watering her roses mentioned seeing a dog running purposefully down the street not long ago. Encouraged, we pressed on. Just as we were beginning to lose hope, we turned a corner, and there, sitting patiently on a porch step, was Rocky. His tail began to wag furiously as he saw us approach. Before we could reach him, the front door opened, revealing Mr. Harrison. His face broke into a surprised smile as he saw us. "Claire, what a pleasant surprise! And I see you've met my new friend here," he said, gesturing to Rocky. As we reached the porch, the mystery unravelled. Mr. Harrison held up a weathered leather wallet. "This fine fellow brought me quite a surprise," he chuckled. "I didn't even realise I'd lost my wallet until he showed up with it. Must have dropped it in the park this morning." Rocky looked immensely pleased with himself, accepting ear scratches from both Mr. Harrison and Claire. As we all caught our breath, Mr. Harrison invited us in for tea, eager to hear the full story of Rocky's adventure. Sitting in Mr. Harrison's cosy living room, sipping tea and recounting our afternoon's quest, I couldn't help but marvel at the series of events that led us here. What started as a simple lunch had turned into a heartwarming tale of a dog's loyalty and cleverness. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm glow through the windows, we said our goodbyes to Mr. Harrison. Walking back with Claire and Rocky, now securely leashed, I felt a deep appreciation for the unexpected adventures that life sometimes provides. Now, as I sit here in the quiet of the evening, I can't help but smile at the day's events. It's a reminder of the connections that bind our little community together, the kindness of neighbours, the loyalty of pets, and the joy of solving a mystery, however small. I hope this tale brings a smile to your face as well, my dear friend. Perhaps it will inspire you to look at your own day-to-day encounters with a sense of adventure. After all, you never know when a simple hello might lead to an unexpected journey. Sweet dreams, and may your own days be filled with delightful surprises and wagging tails. Good night.